The chains were heavy on his wrists. They had been heavy for 6 months now, but Daniel Hayes had stopped noticing. He walked through the dark halls of the Imperial Palace with his head held high. Even as the guards pushed him forward with their weapons, the Volanti Empire had captured him during what was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission. His ship, the Valiant, had been destroyed in orbit. His crew was dead. He was the only survivor, and sometimes he wondered if death would have been the kinder fate. The Volanti were not like humans. They stood 8 feet tall, with silver skin that moved like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed with inner fire, and their voices carried the weight of centuries. They had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. To them, humans were nothing more than insects, creatures too young and too weak to matter. Emperor Zorth the Undying sat on a throne made from the bones of conquered kings. He was ancient beyond measure, having ruled for 800 years. When Daniel was first brought before him, the Emperor had looked at him, the way a child might look at a bug before crushing it under his foot. But the Emperor did not kill Daniel. Instead, he did something far worse. He turned him into a lesson. Daniel was taken to the education wing of the palace, where the imperial princesses studied the ways of war and conquest. Princess Elaine and Princess Marathi were twins, daughters of the Emperor himself. They were young by Volanti standards, only 200 years old, but they carried themselves with the pride of their ancient bloodline. The purpose was simple. Let the princesses study the primitive human. Let them see his weakness, his fear, his inferiority. Let them understand why the Volanti were destined to rule and why species like humanity were destined to serve. On the first day, Daniel was placed in a cage at the center of the study chamber. The princesses sat on elevated platforms, looking down at him like scientists examining a specimen. Selene held a data tablet recording observations. Marathi simply stared, her glowing eyes unreadable. A Volanti tutor stood nearby, explaining the biological differences between humans and Volanti. Humans were fragile. Their bones broke easily. Their skin offered no protection. They lived for less than a century, barely a blink of an eye compared to Volanti lifespans. They could not survive in extreme temperatures, could not breathe in low-oxygen environments, and could not regenerate damaged tissue. The tutor concluded his lecture with a simple statement. Humans were evolutionary failures, a species that had somehow survived, despite every disadvantage nature had given them. Daniel listened to all of this in silence. When the tutor finished, there was a long pause. Then, to everyone's surprise, Daniel laughed. It was not a bitter laugh or a desperate laugh. It was genuine, the kind of laugh that comes from hearing something truly funny. Princess Marathi leaned forward. "Why do you laugh, human?" Daniel looked up at her, still smiling. "Because everything your tutor said is true. We are fragile. We do break easily. We die young. But here's the thing your tutor did not mention. We are still here." The tutor made a dismissive sound. "You are here because we allow it. Your species exists at the mercy of greater powers." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, we are here because we refuse to die. Do you know the history of my world? We survived ice ages that covered our planet in frozen death. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived wars where we tried to destroy ourselves with weapons that could crack the earth. Every single time, we should have died. Every single time, we came back." Princess Selene looked up from her tablet, her expression shifting from boredom to curiosity. "You speak as if survival is an achievement. Survival is merely the absence of death, is it?" Daniel asked. "Then why have so many species failed at it? Your empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. How many of those species still exist? How many of them are more than footnotes in your history books?" The chamber fell silent. The tutor looked uncomfortable. The princesses exchanged glances. Daniel continued, his voice calm and steady. Your empire has never faced anything like us. Not because we are strong or smart or powerful, but because we do not know how to give up. It is not in our nature. When we fall, we get back up. When we lose, we learn. When we die, our children carry on. You can burn our cities, kill our soldiers, and destroy our ships. But you will never, ever break our spirit. Because we have been through worse. We have done worse to ourselves. And we are still here. That night, Princess Mirathi came to his cell alone. She stood outside the energy barrier, her silver skin glowing faintly in the darkness. I want to understand, she said quietly. How can a species so weak believe they are strong? Daniel sat on the cold floor of his cell, looking up at her. We do not believe we are strong. We know we are weak. That is our secret. When you are weak, you have to be clever. You have to work together. You have to care about each other, because alone, none of us would survive. Our weakness made us build families, communities, nations. It made us love each other, protect each other, die for each other. Mirathi was silent for a long moment. The Lanthi do not think this way. We are born strong. We do not need each other. Maybe that is your weakness, Daniel said softly. You have never had to need anyone, so you never learned how to. She did not respond. She simply stood there, watching him with those ancient, glowing eyes. Then she turned and walked away. But she came back the next night. And the night after that, by the end of the first month, she was sneaking food to his cell. Not the nutrient paste the guards gave him, but real food from the palace kitchens. She said nothing about it. She simply left it and walked away. By the second month, Princess Selene had joined her sister in these secret visits. Unlike Mirathi, Selene was direct. She asked questions about human history, human culture, human art. She wanted to understand how a species so young had created so much. Daniel told them stories. He told them about the great wars and the greater peace that followed. He told them about explorers who crossed oceans in wooden ships. About scientists who unlocked the secrets of the universe. About ordinary people who became heroes simply because someone needed to be brave. The princesses listened. At first, they listened with skepticism, then with curiosity, then with something that looked almost like admiration. By the 6th month, Daniel Hayes was no longer just a prisoner. He was something far more dangerous. He was a teacher, and his students were beginning to question everything they had been taught. Emperor Zorath had ruled for 800 years. In that time, he had crushed rebellions, conquered empires, and turned entire star systems to ash. He had seen every kind of betrayal, every kind of deception, every kind of treachery that the universe had to offer. Nothing surprised him anymore, until now. He first noticed the change in his daughters during a formal dinner. Mirathi, who had always been quiet and obedient, asked a question that made the entire table fall silent. Father, she said, her voice soft but clear, why did we destroy the Kethrani? The Kethrani had been a peaceful species, artists and musicians who had posed no threat to the Empire. Zorath had ordered their extermination simply because they occupied a planet he wanted. It had been a minor decision, one of thousands he had made over the centuries. Because they were in our way, he answered simply. But they offered to leave, Mirathi continued. They offered to relocate to another world. They did not fight us. They did not resist. Why did we kill them all? Zorath studied his daughter with cold eyes. Where is this coming from? Selene spoke up, her voice calm and measured. We have been studying the histories, Father. The real histories, not the ones the tutors teach. Many of the species we destroyed pose no threat to us. We killed them because we could, not because we needed to. The Emperor set down his eating utensil. The servants in the room stood frozen, not daring to breathe. No one spoke to Emperor Zorth this way. No one questioned his decisions, ever. "You have been speaking with the human," he said. It was not a question. Neither princess denied it. Zorth rose from his throne, his silver skin crackling with barely contained power. "The creature has poisoned your minds. He has filled your heads with weakness and doubt. This ends now." He summoned Captain Viarn, commander of the palace guard. Viarn was ancient, almost as old as the emperor himself. He had served the throne with perfect loyalty for 8 centuries. His hands had ended more lives than any weapon in the Empire's arsenal. "The human prisoner," Zorth commanded. "Execute him at dawn. Make it public. Make it slow. Let the entire Empire see what happens to those who corrupt the Imperial bloodline." Viorn bowed his head. "As you command, my Emperor." The princesses were dismissed to their chambers. Guards were posted at their doors to ensure they could not interfere. Zorth returned to his throne, satisfied that the matter was resolved. He did not know his daughters as well as he thought. Selene and Mirathi had been raised in the palace, surrounded by servants and guards who had known them since birth. Many of these servants were loyal to the emperor, but many others had watched the princesses grow from children into young women. They had seen the change in them over the past 6 months. The light that had begun to shine in their eyes, the questions they were asking, the kindness they were showing. When Selene appeared at her chamber door and asked a servant named Kayla to deliver a message, Kayla did not hesitate. When Mirathi asked another servant to create a distraction at the guard post, the servant agreed without question. By midnight, both princesses were free. They made their way through the service corridors of the palace, passages that the guards rarely patrolled. They moved quickly and quietly, their silver skin dimmed to avoid detection. They had never done anything like this before. They had never had a reason to. They reached Daniel's cell just as the guards were preparing to move him to the execution chamber. "Stop," Selene commanded. The guards turned, weapons raised. When they saw who had spoken, they hesitated. These were the imperial princesses, heirs to the throne. They could not simply be ignored. "Your Highnesses," one guard said carefully, "the Emperor has ordered the prisoner's execution. We are following his command." "And I am telling you to stop," Selene repeated. She stepped forward, placing herself between the guards and Daniel's cell. Mirathi moved to stand beside her. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. This was unprecedented. No one had ever defied an imperial execution order, but no one had ever been asked to go through the princesses to carry one out. "Your Highnesses, please," another guard said. "If we do not obey, the Emperor will have us killed. And if you harm us, he will do far worse," Mirathi replied. "You know this. You cannot touch us. You cannot move us. So you will stand there and wait." Daniel watched this from inside his cell, his heart pounding. He had known that his time was running out. He had heard the guards talking about the execution. He had prepared himself to die with dignity, to show these aliens that humans did not beg, did not grovel, did not break. He had not prepared for this. "What are you doing?" he called out. "You cannot protect me forever. Your father will come. He will be furious." Selene glanced back at him. "Let him come. Let him see what he has created. Let him see what you have taught us." "I did not teach you to throw your lives away," Daniel said. "No," Mirathi agreed. "You taught us that some things are worth fighting for. You taught us that power without purpose is meaningless. You taught us that the measure of a person is not how many they can destroy, but how many they can save." Daniel shook his head. "Those were just words, stories. I never meant for you to—" "You meant every word," Selene interrupted. "We could see it in your eyes. You believed what you said. And you made us believe it too." The standoff continued through the night. More guards arrived, summoned by the original group. Soon there were 24 warriors in the corridor, all heavily armed, all uncertain what to do. The princesses did not move. They did not waver. They stood before Daniel's cell like statues carved from silver light. Just before dawn, Captain Viorin himself arrived. He was tall even by Volanti standards, his body covered in ancient scars, his eyes burning with the cold fire of a warrior who had seen more death than anyone should ever see. He looked at the princesses. He looked at the guards. He looked at the human in the cell. "Explain," he said simply. Selene met his gaze without fear. "This human is under our protection. He will not be executed. The Emperor commands otherwise." Then the Emperor is wrong. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. To say the Emperor was wrong was treason. It was grounds for execution. Even the princesses were not immune to such laws, but Selene did not take the words back. Myrthi stood beside her, silent but resolute. Captain Varen studied them for a long moment. He had served the imperial family for 800 years. He had watched emperors rise and fall. He had seen princesses and princes of every temperament, every ambition, every weakness. He had never seen anything like this. "You would die for this creature?" he asked. Myrthi answered without hesitation. "Yes. Why?" The question was simple, but the answer was not. Myrthi looked at Daniel, then back at Viorin. "Because he would die for us," she said. "Because he already has died in every way that matters. He lost his ship, his crew, his freedom. He has nothing left. And yet he gave us everything he had. His stories, his wisdom, his hope. He asked for nothing in return. He expected nothing. He simply gave." She stepped toward Viorin, her voice soft but firm. "When was the last time anyone in this empire gave anything without expecting something back? When was the last time anyone showed kindness without calculating the benefit? This human, this primitive creature from a backwater world, has more honor than any Volanthi I have ever known." Viorin said nothing, but he did not give the order to attack. 5 years had passed since the night Emperor Zorath chose not to kill Daniel Hayes. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Volanthi Empire still stood, vast and powerful, but it was no longer the same. Something had shifted. At its core, something that began in a prison corridor with 2 princesses and a human who refused to give up. Daniel was no longer a prisoner. In the months following his confrontation with the Emperor, he had been given a new title, one that had not been used in over 2,000 years. He was named Valued Voice, an advisor to the throne who could speak freely without fear of punishment. It was an ancient position, created in the early days of the Empire when the Volanthi still valued wisdom over raw power. At first, Daniel did not know what to do with this freedom. He had spent so long as a prisoner that the absence of chains felt strange, almost wrong. But Princess Myrthi helped him adjust. She became his guide to Volanthi society, teaching him their customs, their history, their hidden weaknesses. Princess Selene, meanwhile, was preparing for something far greater. Emperor Zorath was ancient, and even he could not live forever. When the time came for succession, Selene would take the throne, but she did not want to rule the way her father had ruled. She wanted something different. She asked Daniel to help her imagine what that might look like. They spent countless hours in discussion. Daniel told her about human governments, about democracy and representation, about the idea that power should serve the people rather than the other way around. He was careful not to push too hard. He knew that the Volanthi were not ready for sudden change. But he also knew that small seeds, planted carefully, could grow into mighty trees. Captain Viren had changed as well. He retired from the palace guard and devoted himself to studying human history. He was particularly fascinated by human wars. not because of the violence, but because of what came after. He could not understand how humans could fight so brutally and then forgive so completely. He could not understand how former enemies could become allies, how wounds could heal, how hatred could fade. Daniel explained it simply. We have short lives. We cannot afford to hold grudges forever. If we spend all our time hating our enemies, we would never have time to love our friends. So we learn to let go. We learn to forgive. Not because our enemies deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Bjorn thought about this for a long time. Then he began writing a book. He called it The Human Paradox. It attempted to explain to Volanti readers how a species so weak could be so resilient, how creatures so mortal could accomplish so much in their brief lives. The book became unexpectedly popular. Young Volanti, raised on stories of conquest and domination, found something refreshing in its pages. They began to question the old ways, just as the princesses had. They began to wonder if there might be more to existence than simply being powerful. Emperor Zorath watched all of this from his throne. He did not approve, but he did not interfere. He was too old to change his ways, too set in his beliefs. But he was also wise enough to see that the universe was shifting around him. The Volanti Empire would either adapt or it would fall. He chose adaptation. In the third year of Daniel's freedom, Zorath did something unprecedented. He sent ambassadors to Earth, not to conquer, not to threaten, simply to observe. He wanted to see for himself what kind of world had produced a being like Daniel Hayes. The ambassadors returned with confused reports. Earth was chaotic, disorganized, filled with competing nations and conflicting ideologies. By Volanti standards, it should have collapsed into anarchy long ago. Yet somehow, humans not only survived but thrived. They built cities, created art, explored the stars. They argued constantly, but rarely gave up on each other. They are impossible, one ambassador reported. They should not exist. And yet, they do. Zorath found this both frustrating and fascinating. He began having private conversations with Daniel, asking questions he would never ask anyone else. What drove humans to keep going? What gave them hope when hope was irrational? How did they love so deeply when they knew death would take everything away? Daniel answered as honestly as he could. We know our lives are short. We know everything ends. But that does not make us sad. It makes us value what we have. Every moment matters because we do not have infinite moments. Every person matters because we cannot take each other for granted. Zorath did not fully understand, but he listened. And in listening, something inside him began to change. In the 5th year, Emperor Zorath announced his abdication. He was tired, he said. 800 years on the throne was enough. It was time for new blood, new ideas, new direction. Princess Selene became Empress Selene, the first ruler of the Volanti Empire to take the throne not through conquest or assassination, but through peaceful succession. Her first act was to declare a new era for the empire. Not an era of expansion, but an era of growth. Not conquest, but cooperation. She signed a peace treaty with the Earth Coalition, formally ending centuries of hostility. Daniel stood beside her as a witness, representing his people for the first time since his capture. Princess Marathi was named ambassador to Earth, the first Volanti to hold such a position. She traveled to humanity's homeworld and walked its streets, talked to its people, experienced its culture firsthand. She reported back that humans were exactly as Daniel had described them: messy, contradictory, passionate, and endlessly creative. They will never be organized, she wrote in one message. They will never be efficient. They will never be perfect. But they will never stop trying to be better. And perhaps that is more valuable than perfection. At the signing ceremony, a human reporter asked Daniel a question that had been on many minds. How did you do it? How did one prisoner change an entire empire? Daniel thought carefully before answering. I did not change anything, he said. I just reminded them of something they already knew. Every species that survives long enough to build an empire has fire in its heart. The Volanthi had simply forgotten how to let that fire burn. They had become so focused on power that they forgot about purpose, so focused on surviving that they forgot about living. The reporter pressed further. But what made them listen to? You specifically? Daniel smiled, thinking of Marathi sneaking food to his cell, of Selene asking questions late into the night, of Bjorn lowering his weapon in that corridor. I think they expected me to be angry. They expected me to hate them for what they did to me. And honestly, part of me did. But I knew that hate would not help me survive. So instead, I chose to share what I loved. I told them about my home, my people, our stories, and dreams. I treated them like people, not enemies. And somewhere along the way, they started doing the same. He looked out at the crowd, where Volanthi and humans stood side by side for the first time in history. That is humanity's real strength. Not our bodies, not our technology, just our stubborn refusal to give up on each other. We believe that everyone deserves a chance. We believe that enemies can become friends. We believe that tomorrow can be better than today. It sounds naive. It sounds foolish. But it works. The reporter had one final question. What happens now? Daniel turned to look at Empress Selene, who was speaking with a group of human diplomats. At Marathi, who was laughing at something a human scientist had said. At Captain Bjorn, who was discussing his book with a young human historian. Now we build something new, Daniel said. Together. It will not be easy. There will be mistakes and setbacks and times when we want to give up. But we will not. Humans never do. And I think, finally, the Volanthi are starting to remember that they do not have to either. He took a deep breath of air that smelled of two worlds mixing together. That is what hope looks like, he said quietly. Not the absence of problems, just the belief that we can solve them, and the willingness to try. The reporter nodded slowly, then turned off her recorder. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was just beginning to change. It would take decades, centuries, perhaps millennia to undo the damage of the old ways. But for the first time, both species were willing to try. And as Daniel Hayes had learned long ago, willingness to try was how everything worth doing began. Captain Bjorn had killed more beings than he could count. He had burned worlds on the Emperor's command. He had watched civilizations crumble and species vanish from existence. In all his centuries of service, he had never questioned an order. He had never hesitated. He had never doubted. But now, standing in this corridor with two young princesses blocking his path, he found himself uncertain for the first time in 800 years. Your Highnesses, he said slowly, I must carry out the Emperor's command. If I do not, I will be executed. My family will be executed. My entire bloodline will be erased from history. Selene nodded. We understand. But we will not move. Bjorn studied the human in the cell. The creature was thin from months of poor food. His skin was pale, his hair unkempt, his clothes torn. By every measure, he was weak, fragile, insignificant. And yet the princesses of the mightiest empire in the galaxy were willing to die for him. Human, Bjorn said, addressing Daniel directly for the first time. Tell me why I should not kill you. Daniel stepped forward, as close to the energy barrier as he could get. He looked at the massive Volanthi warrior without fear. He had nothing left to lose. I cannot give you a reason that makes sense to you, Daniel said honestly. I am one man. My death or survival changes nothing for your empire. But let me ask you something instead. Bjorn tilted his head slightly, a gesture of curiosity. Ask, in all your centuries of conquest, how many enemies have you faced who simply refused to give up? The captain considered the question. Many. All of them fell eventually. And after they fell, did they stay down? Voron's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Daniel took a breath. I mean, after you defeated them, did they ever rise again? Did any of them rebuild? Did any of them come back stronger than before? Or did they simply fade away into nothing? The captain was silent. The answer was clear to everyone in the corridor. Once the Volanti defeated an enemy, that enemy was finished. Broken peoples did not recover. Crushed civilizations did not rebuild. That was the way of the universe. Now let me tell you about my people, Daniel continued. 300 years ago, we had a war that killed 60 million of us. 60 million. Our cities were rubble. Our economies were destroyed. Our lands were poisoned with radiation. By every rational measure, we should have collapsed. We should have fallen into chaos and never recovered. He paused, letting the words sink in. But we did not. Within 50 years, we had rebuilt everything we lost. Within 100 years, we had reached for the stars. Within 200 years, we had spread across a dozen worlds. We did not just survive. We grew. We expanded. We became stronger than we had ever been. Voron's expression shifted slightly. That is impossible. No species recovers from such devastation. Humans do, Daniel said simply. We always have. It is what makes us who we are. He stepped back from the barrier and looked at the guards surrounding him. You think I am weak. You think my species is inferior. And by your standards, maybe we are. We cannot live for centuries. We cannot regenerate our bodies. We cannot survive in hostile environments. But we have something your species lost a long time ago. What is that? Voron asked. Stubbornness, Daniel said with a slight smile. Pure, irrational, unstoppable stubbornness. When the universe tells us to die, we say no. When logic says we cannot win, we fight anyway. When every rational calculation says we should surrender, we refuse. He looked directly at Voron. You are scared of me, Captain. Not because I am dangerous. Not because I am powerful. But because somewhere deep down, you know that if you kill me, it will not matter. My people will not stop. They will not give up. They will not accept defeat. They will remember me, and they will come. Maybe not today. Maybe not in 100 years. But someday, they will come. And they will never, ever stop coming. The corridor fell silent. The guards looked at each other uneasily. Even Voron seemed unsettled by the human's words. He speaks the truth, Murthy said softly. I have studied their history. They have faced extinction dozens of times. They have always survived. They have always come back. Selene added, and they do not forget. They remember their heroes. They remember their martyrs. If you kill this man, you will not be eliminating a threat. You will be creating a legend. You will be giving them a reason to fight. Voron turned to his guards. Leave us. All of you. The guards hesitated, but only for a moment. They knew better than to question Captain Voron. One by one, they filed out of the corridor until only Viren, the princesses, and Daniel remained. I have served the Empire for 8 centuries, Viren said slowly. I have seen emperors come and go. I have watched our civilization grow powerful beyond measure. But I have also watched it grow stagnant. We no longer create. We only consume. We no longer build. We only destroy. We have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight, to hope. He looked at Daniel. When I was young, before I became a warrior, my people told stories. Stories of heroes who faced impossible odds. Stories of ordinary people who became great through courage and sacrifice. We do not tell those stories anymore. We do not need to. We are already powerful. We are already strong. We have no need for hope. That is where you are wrong, Daniel said quietly. Everyone needs hope. Even the powerful. Especially the powerful. Without hope, power becomes empty. It becomes meaningless. You conquer because you can, not because you should. You destroy because it is easy, not because it is right. Bjorn was silent for a long moment. The Emperor will not accept this, he finally said. He will come himself. He will demand your death. I know, Daniel replied. And when he does, I will face him. Not because I think I can win, but because giving up is not something I know how to do. Princess Selene moved to stand beside Daniel's cell. You will not face him alone. We will stand with you. Marathi joined her sister. Whatever happens, we will not abandon you. Bjorn watched the three of them, the human prisoner and the two Volanthi princesses, standing together as if they were old friends, as if they had known each other for years instead of months. Why? He asked. Why does this creature matter so much to you? Selene answered without hesitation. Because he showed us who we could be. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but something better, something worthy of our power. Marathi nodded. He made us want to be more than what we were raised to be. That is worth protecting. That is worth fighting for. Bjorn looked at Daniel one last time. The human met his gaze steadily, without fear or hostility. There was something in those eyes that Bjorn had not seen in centuries. Something that reminded him of the stories from his youth. It was fire. The fire of someone who would never give up, no matter what. Slowly, Captain Bjorn lowered his weapon. I cannot promise anything, he said. When the Emperor arrives, I do not know what I will do. That is all we ask, Daniel said. One moment at a time. That is how we survive. One moment at a time. Bjorn turned and walked away. He did not look back. Behind him, the princesses remained at their posts. And Daniel Hayes, prisoner of the Volanthi Empire, sat down in his cell and waited for dawn. He had faced death before. He would face it again, and he would not look away. The palace shook, not from an earthquake, not from an attack, from anger. Pure, ancient, overwhelming anger. Emperor Zorath had learned that his guards had failed to carry out his command. He had learned that his daughters were standing in open defiance. He had learned that Captain Bjorn, his most loyal servant, had walked away without completing his duty, for the first time in 400 years. The Emperor left his throne room. He walked through the corridors of the palace like a storm made flesh. His silver skin blazed with power that crackled and sparked in the air around him. Servants fled before him. Guards stepped aside and bowed their heads, not daring to meet his eyes. The very walls seemed to tremble at his approach. When he reached the prison corridor, he found exactly what his spies had reported. His two daughters, Selene and Marathi, standing before the human cell. And beside them, not behind them, stood Captain Bjorn and a dozen of his elite guards. Zorath stopped. His burning eyes swept across the scene, taking in every detail. Explain this, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of mountains. It was the voice of a being who had ruled for 8 centuries and destroyed anyone who had ever dared to challenge him. Selene spoke first. Father, we ask you to reconsider. The human, did I ask for a negotiation? Zorath interrupted. I gave an order. My order was defied. I want to know why my own daughters, my own captain, my own guards have turned against me. Marathi stepped forward. We have not turned against you, Father. We are trying to protect you. Zorath laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Protect me? From what? From this? He gestured at Daniel with contempt. This creature? This insect? This primitive animal from a primitive world? From yourself, Murthy said quietly. The Emperor's laughter stopped. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop by several degrees. What did you say? Murthy did not back down. The Volanthi Empire is dying, father. Not from enemies. Not from war. From emptiness. We have conquered everything, and we have become nothing. We have no purpose anymore. We have no direction. We simply exist, consuming and destroying, until there is nothing left. That is the way of all things, Zorath said coldly. The strong survive. The weak perish. This has always been true. But what happens when there is no one left to conquer? Selene asked. What happens when we have destroyed every other species in the galaxy? What will we do then? Turn on each other? Fade away into nothing? The Emperor's eyes narrowed. This is the human's poison. These are not your thoughts. These are his thoughts, planted in your minds like seeds of weakness. Daniel spoke up from his cell. They are thinking for themselves. That is what scares you, is it not? Not me, not my species. Just the simple fact that your daughters have started asking questions you cannot answer. Zorath turned his full attention to Daniel. The weight of his gaze was almost physical, pressing down on the human like a giant hand. You dare speak to me? I have nothing left to lose, Daniel replied calmly. You can kill me whenever you want. You have always had that power. But you cannot kill what I have given them. You cannot kill ideas. You cannot kill hope. The Emperor raised his hand. Power gathered around it, glowing with deadly light. One gesture, and Daniel would cease to exist. One movement, and this entire problem would be over. But before he could strike, Captain Viorin stepped forward. My Emperor, he said, his head bowed but his voice steady. I must speak. Zorath paused. Viorin, you have served me faithfully for 8 centuries. Give me one reason why I should not destroy you where you stand. Viorin raised his head and met the Emperor's eyes. Because I finally understand what we have lost. Explain. Viorin took a breath. It was the first time in centuries that he had spoken his true thoughts to the Emperor. When I was young, before you raised me to be your weapon, I believed in things. I believed in honor. I believed in courage. I believed that power was meant to protect, not just to destroy. Over the centuries, I forgot those beliefs. I became what you needed me to be. A killer, a conqueror, an instrument of death. He glanced at Daniel. This human reminded me of what I used to be. He speaks of hope and resilience and never giving up. Those are not weaknesses, my Emperor. They are the very things that made us great once. Before we became so powerful that we forgot why power matters. Zorath's hand still glowed with deadly light. You would defy me for this creature? I would ask you to reconsider, Viorin said carefully. Not for his sake. For ours. The Emperor looked at his captain, then at his daughters, then at Daniel. He saw the determination in their eyes. He saw that they were not afraid of him, even though they knew he could destroy them all with a thought dot, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his ancient eyes. Something that might have been doubt. You believe this human has value? He asked. Selene nodded. Yes, Father. Not because he is strong, but because he makes us want to be better. Better how? Mirathi answered. Better than conquerors. Better than destroyers. We could be builders, Father. We could create instead of consume. We could lead instead of dominate. We have the power to shape the galaxy. Why must we always use that power to destroy? Zorath was silent for a long moment. The glow around his hand faded slowly. I have ruled for 800 years, he finally said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species evolve and die. And in all that time, I have never questioned my path. Conquest is the only way. Strength is the only truth. This is what I have always believed. He looked at Daniel. And now a human, a creature from a species that has barely left its cradle, tells me that I am wrong. That my entire philosophy is flawed. That everything I have built is empty. Daniel met his gaze without flinching. I did not tell you anything. Your daughters came to their own conclusions. Your captain remembered his own past. I just answered their questions. The rest was always inside them. Zora studied the human for a long, terrible moment. You are clever, he said at last. Cleverer than I expected. You did not try to fight us. You did not try to escape. You simply told stories. And those stories planted seeds that I cannot kill without destroying my own family. Stories are powerful, Daniel agreed. They are how my people survived. We passed down knowledge and wisdom through stories. We taught our children right from wrong through stories. And yes, sometimes we changed the world through stories. The Emperor lowered his hand completely. The power around him faded. I will not kill you today, he said. Not because I believe you are right, but because I need to understand how you have done this. How you have turned my own blood against me with nothing but words. He turned to leave, then paused. But know this, human. If I decide that you are a threat to my empire, no story will save you. No words will protect you. I will end you, and I will end anyone who stands in my way. Daniel nodded. I understand. Zorath walked away, his silver form disappearing into the shadows of the palace. Behind him, the princesses finally allowed themselves to breathe. Captain Bjorn sheathed his weapon. The guards relaxed their stances, and Daniel Hayes, still a prisoner, sat down in his cell and allowed himself a small smile. He was still alive. That was a victory. For now, that was enough.